No worries.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April 4th meeting of the Gateway API Gamma project. As always, Kubernetes Code of Conduct rules are in effect, so please treat each other respectfully. And with that, let's get started. We'll start by going through a recap of last meeting. Because we're alternating time zones, so knowing that not all folks can attend both meetings, and the meeting notes should be linked in the invite for this meeting. Please add yourself to the list of attendees so we can keep track of who's coming to these meetings, as well as we have an open agenda. So if there's something you want to discuss, please feel free to add your topic to the meeting notes section. All right, just to briefly recap what we went over last week. Rob shared a doc on the goals for Gateway API GA prioritization, which basically means trying to get Gateway API stable and to, I believe, a 1.0 officially. It's implied by GA. And basically prioritizing that work and the associated legwork and supporting things needed to make that happen over kind of continue to expand the feature scope of Gateway API. That's Gamma's basically being treated as a parallel effort to that though. So we have similar goals of trying to get Gamma to an implementable state. So hopefully these will be parallel tracks and can continue at the same time, but definitely trying to hit the goal of Gateway API going GA because we know that people are using it in production. Oh yeah, and timeline for that is hopefully by October for KubeCon NA. John started work on the Gamma conformance framework implementation, which we are super excited about.
Big kudos to John on that one, actually.
Yes. Yeah, so just a couple weeks before this, we merged Gap on the intended plans for how we want to approach conformance for Gamma. And John got started on this. So yeah, it is going to be very exciting. We're hoping to pull some stuff out of tooling that exists for Istio currently to make that more general purpose to be able to run performance tests as we know how this stuff should behave.
Hey, Mike, can you make your window narrower, please?
Narrower.
One thing I will say now that we have a list of tests that we want and a couple examples of tests, it's very easy to go shard out the list and have people contribute if you're interested, especially I think it's a fairly good low-hanging fruit for newer contributors trying to ramp up. We should probably create an issue that has like a checkbox for each of the cases and people can maybe claim them or something. I will take an action item to do that, I think. Rob?
Yeah, I don't know why this thought hadn't come to me yet, but are we planning on separating mesh conformance tests into like conformance/mesh or some kind of subdirectory so it's you can have mesh specific reviewers or something like that? I don't know if that's over optimization, just thinking before we add too many.
We did not from reviewer standpoint, although we potentially could. From a test running them though, the whole supported feature thing that Shane and others have been working on though, I think is pretty clear for that, right? You say you support the mesh feature and you run the mesh test. Yep. I'd be fine with a new folder. I think we can easily add it before. At least right now, all of them have like mesh-xyz in the file name prefix, so it will be easy to separate them out if needed.
Yeah, it's probably fine as is. Cool.
All right. What else? Keith started a doc on clarifying parent ref. So basically capturing some of the historical context here about how we're not totally happy with targeting service as a parent ref, but we think that it is the most pragmatic decision for the time being. this was, I guess, intended to support some of the upcoming API review for Gamma, and some of the questions that SIG network reviewers had, is my understanding of the intent of the stock. And also kind of to start on some of the discussions of the whisperings that we've heard of desires to break up the service monolith. And I've been working with Flynn on a gap for routing across boundaries. I've shared it with a handful of folks across Gamma, Gateway API, SIG multi-cluster, and internally. And I am currently working through the process of reconciling that feedback, revisiting some assumptions I had, and trying to get this into a state where it is ready for more viewers. So that is very much a work in progress, but there is at least a substantial amount of content there. So
Reconciling makes that sound so simple.
no, it's about as complex as Kubernetes reconciling.
Yeah.
All right. So are there any questions on the recap before we move into the agenda for this evening, this afternoon? All right. Well, then I'll hand it over to Shane if you want to go over highlights for the KubeCon SIG network intro.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
Well, we
Can you
could
hear
for
me?
a second. Yeah.
Am I good? Okay. Pardon. Yeah. So I'm doing with Surya and Antonio the SIG network intro at KubeCon this year, and I'm going to talk about Gateway API. And I wanted to bring up a few slides about Gamma and just how things are going as like a here's stuff that will come in the future kind of thing. So I am just kind of touching base here just to see if it's all crickets, that's fine. I can still come up with something, but if there's anything anybody would specifically like me to highlight.
For Gamma in particular, I
Yeah,
kind of feel
It's okay
like,
if it's crickets.
yeah, I was gonna say it all the things I can think of that you might want to highlight feel like they'd have to be highlighted with major caveats to avoid getting you laughed off the stage or something.
Well, no, I mean, there's like, we
Applying
have
an
conformance
HTTP route
tests.
to a service.
Yeah, we have some conformance tests that we're starting now. It's all kind of, you could call it experimental and stuff like that, but that's kind of where
Okay, in all
that's one of
seriousness,
the
you
things I'll bring
probably,
up.
in all seriousness, you probably will be able to point out that there are at least a couple of service meshes with an experimental implementation of Gamma stuff.
Yeah, I see the wins
Yeah.
are that there's, I think it's two. Someone please tell me if I'm wrong.
It'd be nice if it were more than two, huh?
It would be nice. But at least me and Flynn can feel superior. A
little.
No, sorry. So there's implementations, we have tests, and we haven't changed all of our decisions that we made 6 months ago. I think those are
You want me to put that
huge
one on
wins,
there?
actually. I don't know if we need to put the last one, but I do think it is actually a big win, right?
I might
Yeah.
phrase
Made
it as
decisions and we've kind of stuck with them.
I might phrase that as we feel like we've actually made some progress as opposed to throwing everything away in the last 6 months and starting over. So
Yeah, so I don't need to take up too much time, and it's totally cool if you think of something that you'd kind of like me to highlight, please PM me on Slack. Otherwise, a big part of it's probably just going to be introducing Gamma because that's the kind of audience for that kind of thing. But thanks, yeah.
And that's what I was going to say. I think the motivation piece for Gamma is going to be would be pretty good for that kind of crowd. So glad to hear that's part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Definitely like a high level overview of just like, yeah, covering the scope, drawing up interest, and hopefully driving more engagement with this. It'd be good to start hearing from like users that are interested in implementing this and what they want to be able to do with it.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Moving on next, Flynn, you have a call to action for Gamma user stories.
So everybody should be able to comment on that doc now. I apologize, when I added it originally, nobody could see it, except probably Mike. When Mike and I were talking about, or as Mike and I have been talking about the interaction between the Gateway API and as for North-South and the Gateway API for Gamma, we realized that we kept kind of kicking various things around as we were talking to each other, and realized that we should probably write down some of these things someplace so that people could go through and get an idea of what sorts of things we think people might actually want to do. This is that document. Most of that is text that I wrote quickly without necessarily thinking terribly carefully to make sure that everything was getting covered. It would be truly lovely if y'all have the opportunity to go through and toss in things that you think would be important to users of Gamma, or things that you want to make sure don't get missed as we think about how to fix some of the problems we've been coming up with. And yeah, that's about it, unless there are any questions there.
Yeah.
Sounded like crickets.
No, I think this is definitely an important start. And kind of like using this as a place to capture shared user stories for all of our different meshes.
Yes.
I know like Istio has a page where they have like a tasks to be done kind of thing for mesh. I'm sure other meshes have similar things, but yeah, having like common workflows and how we expect to express them within Gamma, just kind of defining intended scope. I think will definitely like help influence and inform like kind of like how we actually approach API design to achieve those kind of things.
Actually, one other note there. Can you flip back to that user stories doc and scroll to the top?
Yep.
So you'll note the names there, Jane, Julian, and Jasmine, where there's a fair amount of overlap between those roles and the Gateway API roles. I've deliberately written them that way because I want to be thinking about specific user personas. But one thing that was very interesting to me as I was going through and adding things was that basically everything I was coming up with was focusing on Jane and sometimes Julian. And so I'm particularly interested in what sorts of things people think Jasmine, the cluster provider, is going to care about as she interacts with the Gamma world. And I feel like a fair amount of this mostly reflects my personal bias. I tend to have spent my time in the cloud native world thinking about things from the application developer's point of view. But yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting too to see what people think the cluster providers of the world need to worry about.
So I finished my breakfast now. I think
Great, just in time to heckle on me, right? Lovely.
No, I think I really like the writing down of the user stories. It's a great idea. I do kind of disagree a little bit with some of it because I think that it's 100% fair for Jane to be like, I don't care about how my business problems get solved, just that they do. Mm-hmm. But the I think that the trap there is that if she doesn't care about the business problems, then she shouldn't care about the business problems. Like, you know, if she only cares about the business problems, then she shouldn't care about how it gets implemented. And so having her say, I want to install a service mesh is like, yeah. And the reason I say that is it's to some extent, it's analogous to a person wanting to do electrical work on their house. Right, like you might say, I want the power points here and here, but you're not going to be. It's not really correct for you to say, I want the distribution board to be set up like this. Right, like that should be a detail that you don't care about.
Having been in the situation of looking at the distribution board of my house, I am very grateful that I don't have to worry about the guts of the distribution.
Exactly right. Like, and so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that in the ideal world, in my mind, a service mesh egress controllers are distribution boards, or they are the concern of the person who needs to care about that, and you care about the fact that the power comes out of the power point and that there's power point where you.
So the interesting thing, the interesting thing to me is that on the one hand, I do agree with you that Jane is not going to want to care about a lot of the details, but we may differ on where some of those details lie, in that Jane probably absolutely wants control over which traffic is getting routed to her workload. She may not care whether an Ingress controller or a service mesh is doing it. Likewise, she probably cares a great deal about being able to do progressive delivery, again, without necessarily caring whether it's the service mesh or the Ingress controller that does it.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, this to me is why I think it would be good to write down some of these stories, because it should be a way that we can go through and start nailing down some things like, yeah, all right, so does Jane really need to go and muck around with stuff in the service mesh if she wants to do a canary deployment of something that's 4 levels deep in the call graph? Maybe she doesn't. Maybe there's another way we can approach that problem entirely that we can still explain to Jane and give her a tool that's useful without requiring her to suddenly become an expert in all things Gamma or all things Gateway API.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just I will put more comments on the thing. I just wanted to raise it to you.
No, I think, yeah, and I think that your point about, whether or not it's fair in some of these areas, I think is very well made. I think that it's something that we absolutely need to keep an eye on as to whether, as we look through these, we probably will end up looking over some of these and going, you know what, this is out of scope. We don't really think it's fair for the user to make this kind of demand to us. But we'll see.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say was to answer your broader question. I think that Jasmine as the cluster provider engineer, and I do like the names, so it does make it easy to talk about them. I think that she's gonna care the most about like things like resource utilization and not overloading shares proxies and things like that, where and so like it's one of those things where maybe Julian might do the actual installation of the service mesh, maybe, but to be honest, I would say probably if I was Jasmine, I would not want anyone installing something as wide ranging as a service mesh or a CNI without me being involved.
It's a really interesting question. And it gets to be really interesting when you're talking about smaller organizations as well as larger ones too. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No. And that's all I wanted to say. I don't want to derail anymore. I've derailed enough.
I think the point of resource utilization is a really good one, actually.
Cool. It feels like this is at least a good start to be able to focus on the roles and kind of like jobs to be done, rather than trying to lead with API design first. So let's, I think this is a great place to kind of like capture that and start from that perspective to make sure that we're like addressing the needs of each of these various personas. So definitely doc is a work in progress. Please feel free to add content or comments to it.
And if anybody really wants to just go through and do a bunch of editing instead of commenting, let me know.
Cool. Up next, Keith is suggesting that we cancel the Gamma meeting, the upcoming Gamma meeting that is during KubeCon week. So that is the meeting on April 18th.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I know this crowd is different. It would be the crowd affected by that cancellation due to the way we do our scheduling. So housekeeping thing, I figured this would be fairly unanimous, but wanted to just make everybody get votes and check how we're all doing. Okay, good. So we'll consider Gamma canceled for that week, just so folks can focus on their KubeCon pre-days like Contrib Summit and such.
I should also note on the topic of this meeting being the APAC friendly one, as of next week, I will actually be in Europe for 3 months, so I will be coming to the other meeting.
Yeah, we get Nick in a different set of people. So that'll be fun.
We'll enjoy having you. Yeah, we'll enjoy having you at the other meeting, Nick.
Zing. Just give me a sec while I call the ambulance for that burn.
Cool. All right. So we will try to get that reflected on the SIG Network calendar so that anybody who is not in here tonight will see the meeting get canceled. And yeah, moving on to Rob, V070 feature freeze on Thursday.
Yeah, if I can figure out how to unmute. I've got a few things on the agenda back to back here. First off, the feature freeze on Thursday. We are trying to get 070 out the door as soon as possible. We added a rough estimated timeline for 070 as part of the milestone. But the high level thing is, if you have a feature that is just on the cusp of getting in, now is the time, in the next 2 days, basically, to get it in. Yeah, that's all. Realistically, this is just the starting point. We go through review process and a couple release candidates, and we probably won't have a final release out till the end of the month. But that means we're not accepting major changes between now and then. Yeah. That's all in the feature freeze. Next up, I just want to throw a reminder out there. Both of these are very related to that feature freeze, things that I'm personally trying to get in. First off is the gap that I presented in a meeting or two ago, I can't remember, but about the interaction between multi-cluster services and Gateway API. I think we have some approvals now. I am really hoping to get this in the next couple of days before that feature freeze. So yeah, I think we're close here. I've got a couple little things to clean up, but please do take a look at it as soon as you can, because I've got a hold on it right now. I think that's the only thing preventing it from merging. I will remove that hold in a couple of days, maybe as soon as tomorrow. So actually, no, there's one more thing. Nick needs to review it. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'll hit that one today.
No, I understand. Yeah. And then finally, the last thing is a port redirect clarification that is really just tangentially related to Gamma, but I think potentially applies. We've had some trouble trying to nail down exactly what redirect behavior should be in the case of HTTP and HTTPS redirects where the port is 80 and 8443 respectively. Should you add the port to the location header? Should it just stay unspecified and rely on scheme? This tries to clarify that a little bit. I would love some additional feedback on this whenever someone gets a chance. I think there's maybe one blocking comment on it right now, but it's just a tiny little clarification rate related to some conformance tests. Yeah, that's all I've got. But again, these are all just tied to that 070 release and our goal of getting that review process started in just a couple days.
I know we had some prior discussions about the MCS Gateway API gap and had like verbal consensus. I'll probably have some time tomorrow to hopefully double check and make sure that those actually ended up as revisions, or if not, do some suggestions to try to get that clarified. Aside from that, I think the bulk of it is kind of like, yeah, if you're using these together, this makes sense. I think many people's initial take on reading through that. Cool. All right. Well, hopefully we'll be able to clear out things and get 070 out in the relatively near future. So that's exciting. That brings us to the end of our scheduled agenda for today. Are there other topics that we wish to discuss at this time?
Did we ever nail down a time that we wanted to get together at KubeCon? I realize as I say that I should go look back over Slack, and I haven't done that yet.
No. No, there's never been anything formal. I would love to, especially people that are able to make it to Contrib Summit. That's basically just a constantly informal gathering of maintainers. So if anyone can make that, that's the best bet. But beyond that, sometimes SIG Network as a whole has done kind of informal lunches where we coordinate on Slack and say, or mailing lists and say, let's meet here at this time and do lunch together. Open to more ideas, but those are the things we've done in the past. Be great to have a Gateway API focused version of that someday. No strong opinions, but yeah, would love to see everyone that's there. And ideally, I think Detroit didn't end up seeing some people till Friday afternoon, which was less than ideal. So
I'm actually not going to be there on Friday afternoon for this one, so
yeah.
Which may prompt some people to decide that Friday evening is the right time to meet up. I don't know, but I don't know. I should have some better sense of what my KubeCon schedule is like in the next few days, so maybe I'll be able to suggest something on Slack too. Trying to grab people for lunch or something like that sounds like a pretty good way to do that.
Yeah, the overall Gateway project update is Wednesday morning, so it may make sense to do a lunch, informal lunch on Wednesday if there aren't much in the way of conflicts. No strong opinions on that, but yeah.
That seems like lunch on Wednesday sounds promising anyway.
Cool.
That would be good. Yeah, I guess on a similar note, does anybody have Gateway API or Gamma things scheduled or submitted for the Contributor Summit CFP or the unconference? It looks like there's a GitHub issue that has no suggestions on it yet for unconference topics for Contrib Summit.
I think we've actually got two. We've actually got two CFPs in. I submitted one that is there's planned to be a update of like here's the things that other people who are working in Kubernetes might find interesting. So conformance testing, policy attachment, that sort of thing. And then I think Shane, you submitted one as well, right?
Yeah, there's like a general Gateway API one that's submitted. We can always, I think, move it around if we really need to.
Yeah. I mean, we'll wait and see what the Contrib Summit folks let us do. But I mean, I think if anyone else wants to submit like an unconference, let's talk about Gateway API session, that's probably also worth doing just so that we've got some options there to talk about it. Yeah, I mean, I submitted my CFP because I feel like the last time Rob and I did an update at a Contrib Summit, there were a lot of questions about things like conformance and reference grant and that sort of thing. And so yeah, it'd be good to give people updates about that.
Yeah, I think Contrib Summit is most valuable for kind of the cross SIG communication. We tend to live in our own little bubbles, and it was very helpful at Contrib Summit to try to open up conversations with other Kubernetes maintainers, people that are contributing here and there. The things that I'm most interested in talking about are things like, conformance, like Nick mentioned, and also reference grant. There's been some efforts to upstream that. So that's really the kind of thing that benefits from in-person discussions with SIG Auth and SIG Storage even, that are all kind of involved in this process. And it is surprisingly hard to get all of those people online at the same time. But if we all happen to be in the same place, that could be helpful. So, yeah.
I have not submitted anything, but I'm definitely interested in having discussions about multi-cluster use cases. So I may add an unconference suggestion for something like that if folks are interested.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I can certainly add an unconference item for, we should get together and talk about Gateway API stuff or talk about Gamma stuff.
Yeah, that sounds good. We can try and turn Contrib Summit into just Gateway Summit at this point.
All right.
Well, I mean, since there are no other things on the unconference one, then each of us on this call should just submit something related to Gateway. Then
Perfect.
Well, thank you, everyone. If there's nothing else on the agenda, I will wrap up early today. Thanks, y'all. Take care. Have a good rest of the day, and hope to see a few of you in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
enjoy.